Howdy, listeners. As we all know, planet Earth has 7.5 billion people, and 7.4 billion of those people have small businesses. Now, to be fair, numbers that size can be hard to envision, and to be even fairer, most of what I just said is entirely made up. But I'll tell you what isn't made up. Keap. Keap is the all-in-one client management software designed specifically for small businesses. Keap takes the most annoying and laborious parts of running a small business and metaphorically tosses them into the sun. Stop grinding yourself to death with busy work and repetitive tasks. Let Keap integrate your customer follow-ups, messaging automation, next-level appointment setting, and so much more. Head over to keap.com and start your free trial of Keap Grow, Keap Pro, or for those looking for something beefier, talk to one of our coaches about Infusionsoft, the product that started it all. More business, less work, that's Keap. Just go to keap.com to start your free trial. That's keap.com. One more time, that's keap.com.
So, Scott, I will tell you, Jasmine was the longest line I waited in at Social Media Marketing World. You had them lined up around the block.
I don't even know what to say to that because that's like literally the first time it's ever happened. So I wish I could be like, it happens all the time. But I was just as shocked as anybody else. I was like, what is going on here?
It was the longest line, and I was completely appreciative that you stuck it out. She greeted every single person in line, took pictures with them. I mean, you are committed to really staying connected with your audience.
Well, you know, you are the people why I get to do what I do. So heck yes, like I would have gone 4 hours, you know, it's just like, you have to say thank you when you have the opportunity in person. I really do believe that.
Well, and I think it's especially noteworthy given that we've found out that Social Media Marketing World is really just a big part. I know they had, it's not like they had an option to go to another boring session. They could have gone out partying. And they decided to wait and talk with you.
Basically, I'm better than a margarita. Who are we kidding, right?
I mean,
there you go.
100%. It was totally worth the line. I felt like it was like Disneyland. When you get to the front of the ride, it was like totally met your expectations. I was like, she is just as cool as she seemed on stage, just as cool as she seems in her post. So I know, Scott, you and I talk a lot about authenticity because it's something I'm like really passionate about. But Jasmine is like one of the most authentic people I know. Every single platform you see, or if you're talking to her face to face, she's that person, the same person you would see across everything. So thank you for being completely worth that wait and for being just so awesome and real. We're like so excited to have you, as I keep saying, fangirling out here. It's my turn to fangirl, I guess.
Well, I am happy to be here. I'm equally fangirling. So thank you guys for having me. Thank you for the opportunity for waiting, because the wait was the derivative of this podcast and the opportunity to get to know people and serve people well. So I'm here to get that party started. So thank you.
Yes, awesome. Well, I did want to share one quick story before we dive into all this awesomeness, which is that last night I had to dive into something that I have not done since probably college, which is I dyed my own hair because my hairstylist, like completely like, I'm trying not to be like those memes where the girls are coming out of quarantine looking like trolls. So I had my roommate dye my gray hairs because I'm convinced I'm not going to come out looking older once this quarantine's over. And that was quite the experience. At some point she said, I know you haven't been wearing makeup, but are you going to wear makeup tomorrow on your podcast since they're going to see your face? I was like, why, Morgan? She said, well, it looks like you have a major sunburn on your forehead and I can't really get more off. I was like, what's happening here? So I just wanted to share that it was an embarrassing evening. I think it mostly evened all out, but I can't wait for things to go back to normal. I mean, so are you guys feeling the same?
Yes, but like, let's just take a moment of appreciation for your hair. It really does look good. I don't see any
didn't fall out.
Yeah, no sunburning, none of this. But you know, I have a greater appreciation for the people who help make women look good in the world. So there you go.
Right. Me too. Scott, are you feeling the same thing over there?
I am. I mean, not for me personally, but yeah, my wife yesterday actually was also doing the whole dye thing herself, and, you know, nails and eyelashes and all the things, like, they got to be done. So it's a big deal. It is, I'm just feeling really appreciative of just being proudly gray, and it's just, it happens, and it just, it works.
Someday I will be that authentic with myself and allow that to happen, but it's going to be probably years down the line. That's self-development. That's going to take a while for me. Not gonna lie. So
Well, so if everybody hasn't picked up by now through the podcast description, we have Jasmine Starr on today. Super excited, not only to hear about maybe something that's more public, your influence on Instagram, but also really to get in to understand your story as a business owner and as a human being. And we're just so pumped to jump in and have you on the podcast today. So first of all, officially welcome, Jasmine.
Thank you.
yes, we can't wait. And I was telling Scott a lot about your journey as a business owner and how you fled from law school, which I thought was so badass, really, just to be like, you know what, this is not the path for me. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your journey and about what made you make the jump into doing something completely different. What kind of gave you the courage? I just thought it was such a good story to share.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation. I also want to set the record straight because I don't want to pretend like life looked different from retrospect, because I think it would be easy for me to step in and be like, it was very brave. I was basically the Joan of Arc of leaving law school. But when that was like so far from the case, it wasn't bravery as much as it was circumstance and feeling like this is a thing I had to do. Now, do I understand that some people wouldn't have made that same decision? Yes. So fine. I could receive a little bit of it, what it means to like grab life by the horns and make a decision for yourself. True. But at the time, my mom had a relapse of brain cancer and we're a very close family. And to me, it wasn't a decision of should I leave law school? The decision that I originally made was I'm leaving law school now and I'll come back. It's like who leaves a full ride scholarship? But what I knew was they had stopped all forms of chemotherapy. My mom had a shunt placed in her brain. And brain surgeries and all that other stuff, radiation, it was time to come to a close. And it was about an 8.5-year battle. And at that point in time, I was wildly overwhelmed, stressed, and unhappy in law school. And then when we got this news, I fell into a deep depression. So I felt like, yes, I made the decision, but I also want to be very forthcoming with like the circumstances surrounding that decision. And so I did what any, 25-year-old Latina does when she doesn't have any money. She moves back home. And so I moved back home. My parents had a wide open door for me. And I thought, wow, I made this really great decision. I moved home. I'm with my mom. And that was the night I moved back home. And then the following morning, I waked up. I waked up because I'm so smart. I woke up and I was just like, what did you do? Like, what did you just do? Like, you just left this thing that you worked so hard for. I'm a daughter of an immigrant. My parents never went to school. It was this thing that I was just like, I'm doing it for my family. I'm doing it for my community. Look. And then all of a sudden I'm like, what do I have? My identity was so tied up in like the titles and the pursuit of what I perceived excellence and promise was, to all of a sudden distilling it down and being like, I have no money. I'm not a student. I don't even want to be a lawyer. And my mom is dying. Like, that kind of like radical awakening leaves you at the bottom to where like the only place you can look up is when your back is in the gutter, you look at the stars. And I know that probably sounds like a really dark Hallmark card, but it was like the reality of my life. And so it was at that time I had been dating my high school sweetheart for a while. We knew we were going to get married, but I'm type A. And I was like, my life has to fit in an Excel spreadsheet. And all of a sudden life like says, haha. And you're like, I need to do this now. I want my mom to see us get married. So we planned a wedding in like less than 3 months. And the doctors said she wasn't going to walk and she wasn't going to talk and she couldn't travel. And against all of those odds, she did all of those things. And she walked me down an aisle. We were in Hawaii. There was 22 people. And the crazy thing is that was she was my North Star. It was a complete wake up call to me realize how short life was. I was 25 and my mom was 50. I had the midlife crisis and I'm like, what am I doing? And what do I want to do? And what is life about? And that changed my life and made me realize how short it was and how sad it is to be unhappy doing something that you think you should be doing instead of the thing that really lights you up. And I'm extraordinarily happy to announce that at the time of this recording, my mom is still with us and she is she's the true Joan of Arc. She is courageous. She is the warrior. Courageous. So yeah.
Wow. What an amazing story.
It is super amazing to me, but I also have to say, being someone who thinks about things differently, my mom has been sick, and I feel like the stability is sometimes what gets me through. So I always admire people. I think it is bravery to leave something you're unhappy with and to say, you know what, that's just not what I'm supposed to do. I'm not sure I've ever had that kind of bravery. I'm just built differently. So I always admire that. And I think it is bravery. I think, sure, you had circumstances that a lot of people can't even deal with when they're already in a profession they love. But I think the way you looked at it is why I think that's bravery. Mm-hmm. It's just a totally different mindset than I would probably be able to have with, to me, family is the world, as it seems to be for you too. And so it's just amazing to me that you were able to do that at that same time and for the better of your entire family and yourself. I think that's very brave. So I appreciate you making sure people know where it stands. But to me, that is bravery. And it is. Maybe you take after your mom with some of that Joan of Arc, because that's pretty damn cool.
I receive that. I'm not going to recoil. That means a lot. So I'll receive it for what it is, and I stand corrected. Happily so. Thank you.
Well, and thank you for being so authentic, though. I have to say I'm frustrated because I was very much looking forward to lawyer jokes. And I just don't feel appropriate at this point in time.
Clay, our CEO, actually fled from law school to keep Infusionsoft going. And so we do like to tease on the lawyer thing because we feel, Scott lovingly says he saved Clay from that life. But
well, and Crystal, I don't even know if you know this, but so my dad is an attorney, and I have three sisters who married attorneys. And I was accepted to law school and was on my way out the door when I realized I don't actually want to do this.
I didn't know that, Scott. You fled too.
Yeah. So I fled. Well, I don't think I can say I fled. I never made it that far. But anyway, so I would love to hear maybe enough about attorneys, for crying out loud. The world has plenty of them. We don't need to. No, I'm just kidding. But Jasmine, I'd love to hear just what are the sort of trace elements of that experience that you see in your life today as you're, from a business perspective. Did it have an impact on where you decided to go? And, how did that part of your journey lead you to where we are today?
I think the residual, it stays with you. It's kind of like glitter in an unexpected birthday card that you're like, why is it still in my hair? Like a week later, that's
So true.
That's what happened at that experience. It's like you look back at everything, and that became the litmus test. That became the new watermark of what you think you're capable of. And it isn't until you're thrusted into an unexpected situation and you're boiled and you just think that it's impossible. I cannot possibly survive this. And then you do, and you realize how strong and resilient you are on the other end. And that very trite comment, like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, that I realized that I really felt that was the thing that was strong enough to kill me, and it didn't. And I always look back at the thing that I remember the most from that experience was New Year's Eve. They closed the hospital where my mom had just had a brain surgery, and it was happening over New Year's. And so she's spending New Year's Eve in a hospital in Los Angeles. And we weren't allowed to stay past visiting hours, but my dad is just a charmer, and all the nurses loved him. And we were able to stay in her room, and we brought in hats and we brought in noisemakers, and my mom was completely bald. And it was a little sobering because at the time my mom wasn't talking about all the things that she did or the memories she made. She was recollecting on the things that she didn't do, the children's book that she wanted to write, and how she always wanted to visit France, and all the things that she wanted to do was the thing that was at the highlight. And in the time that you're going through it, you don't really think about it, but it leaves this indelible impression that like days and weeks and months. And I'm standing here today, years later, saying, I don't want to be on my deathbed wondering what if. And I just think that every time we pursue something new, I say we, my husband is my business partner. We do everything together. He is truly the better half of the business. Every time we venture on something new, the foundation is I just don't want to look back and wonder what happened here. I would rather look back and be like, wow, we learned a really big lesson. Don't do that again. But that level of like childlike wonder is just so freeing as an entrepreneur.
Are you experiencing it even more now that you have a new baby in your family?
As a wise mother of 5 weeks, yeah, I mean, I just feel like everything that I thought I knew is just now completely recalibrated. It was just like my whole life was in search of professional excellence or whatever the case may be. And then all of a sudden I look at her and I just think, oh, this is why. Like, this is why I'm supposed to, like, may my ceiling be her floor. Everything I do should be and will be for her and her generation. And nothing lights me up more than that.
That just gave me chills. I love that. Make my
so great.
Ceiling her floor. I mean, that's That's amazing to me. And she is adorable, by the way. I don't think you post near enough pictures.
Well, I know that's one crazy thing is like people, I think, expected that that's 100% what I would be doing. And, it's really odd. One of the things that is like when you put bits of your life out on the internet is like they no longer become your own. And I just think that I have very thick skin. If people want to say things about how I look, how I talk, my business, the decisions I make, it means nothing to me. Like I want you to like me. I just don't really care if you do. But if somebody says something about me being a mother or my daughter, I'm just not in that position to field it quite yet. For those who don't know, we've waited, my husband and I have waited so long to adopt a child. And it finally happened unexpectedly on February 2nd, 2020. And so without like that emotional preparation, I never had a gestation period. We literally had 34 hours notice and we're having a baby.
Man.
So, so it's like all of a sudden people are having opinions about the things that I'm doing. And I just realized, you know what, I'm of course going to share her. Of course, I'm her mother, but we're definitely keeping that like as a larger part or private part of our life. So
I think that's good. Well, she's adorable. And the pictures you just posted were so cute. All the like four-line, I think it was. She's like perfect. She's so cute.
And I feel like I can say really thank you because I didn't have anything to do with her parents. Like, yes, thank you. I mean, isn't she? I'm like, thank God for her birth parents. It's all good. It's all good.
Well, if you're taking the pictures, you can at least take credit for that. Right?
So speaking of pictures, let's talk about your business. You really dove into photography, straight from law school. I remember hearing you talk about getting your first camera. And I thought that was just such a cool thing to dive straight from that into building this successful business. So tell us a little bit about the journey, any of the struggles you felt while you were building that part of your business. And I'm curious because I one time, a long time ago, did think about being a photographer. And I saw on your website you have about a saturated market. Mm-hmm. That was one of the concerns I had at the time about photography. So how did you kind of push past that, knowing the market was, getting a little saturated? How did you make yourself stand out?
I think it's really important before I get into the question is to really understand that I don't feel like the photographic world is like an island, as if this is somehow exempt or the industry that is oversaturated. What has happened with technology, specifically social media, is that the barriers to entry to virtually any industry are so low that the person who talks the most and the loudest then becomes the professional. It's less about the letters after your name. It's less about the accolades. It's less about the awards. It's less about your certifications as much as it is how much do you show up, which is crazy to actually say and crazier to believe it. But it is in fact the case. And I was living and creating and starting a business at the time that whole paradigm shift had been existing. So I got my very first camera in 2006 after expressing to my husband that I wanted to be a photographer. And he's like, okay, but you don't have a camera. And I was like, yes, but if I got one, I think I can make this work. So January 1st, I opened the camera. January 1st, 2006, and I'm terrible. Like I'm worse than worse. It's like there's nobody worse on the internet. And I realized that I have a long way to go and I don't know what I'm doing. So I basically teach myself on Google using my manual. I start shooting whatever I could, however I could. And then by 2007, it was the first time that somebody actually paid me for a photographic gig. And then all of a sudden I felt like I am officially in business. But it was during this time that I realized the gravity of the situation. I'm not very good. I have my father is an immigrant. I knew nobody in my city, in my church, in my community, anyone who had ever started a business. So this idea that you can be an entrepreneur was so new to me that I'm like actually unpeeling it. And it's like 27 years old that you realize, wait, I can own a business? Like, what does that look like? So all of these things are happening at the same time. I realize I've never started a business. I don't have any money. I don't have any resources. I don't have any of that stuff, but I have a camera. And around this time, 2007, there's this thing called a blog. And I was like, I'm just going to blog. And my husband and I spoke that I would try photography for a year. And if it didn't work, I would go back to law school and get my full ride scholarship to UCLA. So I'm trying it for a year and it seems to be taking off. And the reason why it's taking off is I have just a camera body. Like I don't even have a lens, right? I don't even have memory cards. I can't afford any of this stuff. I can't even afford a camera bag. What I'm doing is every paycheck I'm putting away 10% to save up to rent my lens, go and practice, return the lens. And then over time,
love it.
I built my business online cash. So that's like a big point of pride for myself because I was never the person who's going to take out $20,000 loan without the clear path of how to pay it back. So I started saving up gear, things of that nature. And then over time, what I realized was I was creating this blog as a documenting what I thought was going to be a failure, so that I could say, see, Jasmine, this was the time that you tried it and it didn't work. And then over time, what happened, I just started blogging about starting a business. I was blogging about where I went out to eat with my husband and the journey with my mom. It became literally long form Instagram. That's what a blog was. And this hadn't existed prior to that. And so people.
Do you think that attitude
Oh,
helped
it was
you,
the
by the
linchpin.
way?
It was the linchpin. And it was.
Yeah. Because I'm struck by just the transparency and authenticity that just shows up, in you in general. And I think that's, I think there's a tendency for us to get really serious about the things that we do. And maybe that's to our disadvantage.
And I think that's something that I have to be very careful of, because Scott, like, quite honestly, I wasn't lucky. I didn't have the luxury to be precious about it. Like, it was like, do this or die. Like, die emotionally, die to your dreams. It's like, now I think, now that we're in a different financial position, social position, like a professional position, I do have the luxury to be precious about it. And now I rage against the preciousness. I rage against, like, I need to protect it. It's proprietary. I'm special. I'm different. It's like, no, you're not, boo-boo. Like, if you're so good at what you do, share it all and have somebody else try to do it so that you're actually measurable of your success. Like, if you're still standing heads and shoulders above everybody else, you're that good. And if you're standing heads and shoulders because you're trying to keep somebody else down, you're not that good. Everyone's going to rise up without you, and you're going to be stuck in the past. So either here nor there, the blog then became the thing that expedited my career and also created, like, a lot of polarities in a photographic saturated industry, because people are like, she's terrible, she sucks, and how does she have a 6-figure business her first year? I built a brand. And this is the thing that I tell people again and again. You don't need money for a brand, and you don't need tools for a brand, and you don't need a website for a brand. You don't need social followers for a brand. You just got to make people feel something. You show them that they matter, and you have a business. Period. The end.
So one of the things you are really, really good about, it always shocks me, is you respond to every DM and every comment. You humanize your brand, yourself as a brand. How do you find the time to do that? I mean, that is crazy to me. You have so many followers on Instagram, and you, like I just said, a few weeks ago, you responded to my comment about my dog. It's, like, so heartwarming that you're just in there really talking to your audience.
And for context, let everybody know how many followers you have today.
A lot. More than we do, Scott. By a lot.
Oh, for crying out loud, Crystal.
166 at the time of this recording.
Awesome.
So actually, I will say that this podcast came as a byproduct of a direct message. Y'all at Social Media Marketing World posted a story, and I respond to stories. Like, it's really important for me to connect with people who were in a room with me. Even if we didn't touch, but you were to take a picture, I need to respond to you and let you know I saw you. Now, to be fair, there will come a time in my career that I might not be able to do it in the same capacity. I'm open to it, but I take a lot of pride in doing that now. And somebody had once explained that there's 3 types of CEOs. There is the marketing CEO, somebody who is their power play is the marketing and creating that connection and understanding desire. There is the culture CEO. So think of, like, CEO of, like, the early days of Southwest. It's like the culture of who they are, and that's where they spend most of their time and energy. And you have a product CEO. So think about, like, Steve Jobs. Like, it's around the thing that you sell. I happen to squarely fall under the marketing CEO. I spend the most of my time doing something for my business that very few other people can do. I can build somebody else for culture. I can bring somebody else in for product. I can bring out somebody else for education. But what I can do beyond nobody else is still connect with the follower and create those connections. There's just too many opportunities that exist from human to human without truly ever knowing who you were to begin with. I didn't think you had an opportunity. I just connected with you. And I think that's the human value. Is like somebody had once said, somebody much smarter, is like your net worth is your network. And that network is really built on social these days. And that has been a game changer for my business.
Well, on that, I know we have you for a little bit longer here, but we're going to break for Worst Business Ideas in History, and we're going to come right back with Jasmine Starr and keep having this great discussion. So hang tight.
How Howdy, folks. I'm Derek Haryu.
And I'm Ducey Van Dusen.
And this is Worst Business Ideas in History.
The show where we look back at some of the most brutal missteps, failures, and flops in consumer history.
And make fun of it.
But also learn something.
Nope. It says in my contract I don't have to learn.
Fine. The rest of us will learn something, and you can just mock people's misfortune.
Sounds good.
Welcome to the Worst Business Ideas in History.
Hey, everybody. This is Derek Haryu.
And this is Ducey Van Dusen.
And today we're talking about one of my very favorite things. Not you, sweetheart.
Yes, one of your very favorite things. Just not what we're talking about today.
Not right now. You're the worst right now, baby. I'm just kidding. That's my daughter. She's interrupting the podcast. I promise I'm a good dad. This week we're talking about one of my favorite things in the entire world, which is coffee. I drink an awful lot of coffee. Some might say too much. And so today we're talking about Maxwell House's pre-brewed coffee in a carton, like in a milk carton. That's just going to happen, folks, so there's not much I can do about it. In 1990, Maxwell House, which is a name most people know pretty well, produced coffee in a carton. Like imagine just like a small one of the slender milk cartons, not the jug, but like the tall slender carton. And what they did is they would pre-brew coffee and they would package it in this foil-lined milk carton.
Now, was this kept cold? Do you know? I'm curious if it was like.
Yeah, it was served in the refrigerated
section. Okay, interesting.
Okay.
So it seems like the idea it would be, not dissimilar to orange juice. Like go get some orange juice as opposed to having something, going and juicing your own oranges for orange juice, right?
Yeah, like at a glance, it makes sense. You're like, oh, it's pre-brewed coffee. We have pre-brewed coffee everywhere. It's 2020. You go to the store, there's a whole part of the freezer section or the refrigerator section that is just pre-brewed cold brew coffee. You got Secret Squirrel and you got Stumptown and you got all these competing brands now. People love their cold brew coffee. Here's the problem though. This was not cold brew coffee. This was hot coffee, then refrigerated in a container, and then the person was expected to pour that into a separate container and heat it back up again and drink it. Because at the time, in the 1990s, there were some people that would drink a latte or an iced coffee, but not many. 1990, people are like, well, wait, the 90s were a Starbucks era. No. The second half of the 90s were Starbucks era. The first half of the 90s, cold coffee wasn't a thing most people consumed. They wanted their coffee. They wanted their coffee hot, their cigarettes unfiltered, and their cars without airbags.
What was the immediate response? Was this something that was like immediately kind of rejected, or did it hang around for a while?
So it wasn't an out and out flop at first. People were intrigued by it. The coffee itself wasn't terrible. It was about as bad as you can imagine a cup of Maxwell House brought to like ice cold temperatures would be. The problem was that the product itself is cold coffee. So you have to heat it up, which means that you've added a step. And it's like, well, it's only one step. You're heating it up in a cup. It's like, yeah, but to brew a pot of coffee is about the same amount of effort. Like, it's actually not that hard to brew a pot of coffee in a normal coffee maker.
So really, they're creating something that, takes up more shelf space, heavier to transport, requires more work on their end, and, is harder for the consumer to get home. And I imagine, I'm curious what the taste was like, but I'm sure the perception would be, well, if I'm going to spend the time to heat this up, then surely fresh brewed coffee is going to be better.
Yeah, they didn't make it nearly convenient enough. The point of a prepackaged product is to make your life easier. But this didn't seem to make anyone's life easier in any significant way. What it did is just created confusion as to what you were supposed to even do with the product. Because it's a carton of cold coffee. Now, let's assume that their intention was to start the iced coffee craze. Well, the problem is that the carton itself has a picture of steaming hot coffee on it.
They clearly weren't going after that mode of of eating this, right?
Correct. You can't heat it up in the original container, partly because it's in a cardboard container and it's definitely going to leak when those sides come apart. The other reason is it's foil lined, so you're likely to just cause a small explosion in your microwave if you try to heat it up. By the way, kids, if you've never tried to put foil in the microwave, don't. It's fun to watch, but it'll ruin your microwave and it'll definitely start a fire. The other problem was that it actually wasn't that shelf stable. By a lot of accounts, there were people that said it tasted stale. It tasted like instant coffee, which I've drank instant coffee. I drink it from time to time. It's not the worst thing in the world, but you drink it because you have no other option. This is a time when every single home in America had a Mr. Coffee in it, and I'm not I exaggerated there, but the true statistic is that at that time, Mr. Coffee, not all coffee makers, just the Mr. Coffee brand, had an 80% market penetration in American households. Yeah. Mr. Coffee was riding high in the late 80s, early 90s. So it created a different way to drink coffee, but certainly not a better way.
Right. It's thinking about what problem are you going to solve, right? And this is a product that seems like it was in search of a problem, right? There's
Sure. So it was only on the market for about 3 years. And then people were like, well, what happened after 3 years? Like, well, it was launched in 1990. Around the mid 90s, that's when we all saw the white and green behemoth that is Starbucks start to expand outside of the Pacific Northwest and just eat everybody's lunch, just like completely change the way we consumed coffee. And that's when cold coffee did start to become a thing, because Starbucks went to the trouble of cultivating an identity around drinking these different types of coffee, releasing them. They actually were basically teaching us, one product at a time, different ways to consume their product.
Absolutely. So I think some of the takeaways from this, the first is, if you want somebody to switch from something that they're doing, it can't be almost as good as what they're doing, definitely. It can't be just as good as what they're doing. It has to be significantly better. If it's just a little bit better than what they're doing at any given moment, you know, whatever the product is. Like if I'm going to go buy a new phone and this phone is just slightly better, well, it better be really cheap, because unless it's a lot better, I'm going to hold off for a while until there's something out there that's way better than what I'm doing, what I have right now, that's really going to give me a benefit. And it's the same with this. If they're trying to make convenient coffee, they didn't get nearly close enough with, you know, packaging that couldn't be heated up directly. You know, Starbucks became the ultimate convenience coffee, right? Just go grab it, made for you already. You
absolutely nailed it. They didn't make anything better here. They didn't improve their product. One could make the case that they're this is a situation where they are diluting their brand identity by saying, hey, don't make this fresh, delicious cup of coffee in your own home. Take almost the exact same amount of time to heat up stale, old, prepackaged, cold coffee and then drink that. So you've absolutely nailed it. If you're putting out a tangential product to your product line, it is absolutely imperative that it solves a problem that is not solved yet, or it is so much better than your existing product. Are you listening to me, Apple computers? So much better than their existing product that it seems like a magical leap forward, which it didn't do on any front.
Yeah, and on the cold side of things, you mentioned that Starbucks did the hard legwork of creating the market for that sort of product. They really had to prep the market before selling that cold brew coffee was really going to become a thing. So there's a lot of work that goes into helping people understand the need or the enjoyment or whatever it is that you're giving. Like there's often that pre-work has to be done.
All right. This has been Derek Haryu
and Ducey Van Dusen.
And we will talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
keeping ever-expanding client info straight, sending the same emails hundreds of times, scheduling and rescheduling appointments over and over. Who enjoys this nonsense? No one, except my cousin Brent, and Brent is the absolute worst. Keap is the premier all-in-one CRM. Just head over to keap.com, that's Keap.com, and start your free trial today. Get the busy work out of the way so you can focus on what's important and make your small business grow with Keap. Start your free trial at Keap.com, that's Keap.com. More business, less work, that's Keap.
All right, welcome back, everybody, from Worst Business Ideas in History. We're on today with Jasmine Starr, and we're deep in the guts of her story. Super excited to continue this. I think, Jasmine, one comment I have about your comment about the different types of CEOs, I think there's a tendency, I think, among business owners to try to be all things. And I just love that you have settled into, you're aware of those distinct sort of archetypes, if you will, and you're settling into who you are. And I think that's a really powerful state of mind to be decisive. And I think, it takes me all the way back to the story that you started with. And, you made a decision that, as you said, the very next day you started to regret it. And I think business owners, the more they can recognize that it's not, you're going to have to make literally thousands and thousands of decisions to be successful as a business owner. It's not the fact that you're going to make all of the right decisions that matters. It's your ability to commit to a decision, lean into it, and then respond. So I love that you have been able to create success in following that, and just the stories that you've been sharing are fantastic.
So I really want to spend a little bit of time. You have found a home on Instagram and really use that to market your business and market yourself as a brand. So I was hoping we could spend a little bit of time helping other business owners really think about how they can be using Instagram as a home and connecting with their audience there.
I want to interject a question here too. Take us back to that first moment when you started with Instagram. And, was there a moment where this is a new platform, you clearly didn't start with 366,000 followers. What was that feeling when you went into it? Kind of give us the journey as you worked your way into Instagram.
So let's go back to that initial question that Crystal had proposed when it had come to, like, how do small business owners use Instagram to grow their business? And it goes back to how I would also answer the experience as how I entered into Instagram land. And that was first and foremost, understanding the importance of consistency. So when you go back to those early Instagram days, nobody knew that Instagram was actually Instagram. It was just like another thing, right? So at the time, after blogging, what really opened my eyes to having scalable conversations online was Twitter. So I started using Twitter, and then I realized I was like late to the game a lot of times, like with Facebook as well. Then I started realizing that those conversations scaled, especially in a visual capacity. And I felt like Facebook was really great for visual creators. And then all of a sudden Instagram came around and it didn't really fit. Like, nobody at the time was like, wow, this is going to be the next big thing. It was just like, this seems like a platform that photographers should be on. And early days, photographers were hated on if you were uploading professional photos. Like it was this very hipster vibe of, it's only the photos you take on your phone. Like, I will never forget, one of the first things I saw on Instagram is like, a unicorn loses its horn every time a photographer uploads a photo that's not from their phone. Okay, I don't know, why do I remember that trash? I have no idea. So I started on Instagram, I'm thinking somewhere in the ballpark of around 2012, but it was so erratic. It was so nonsense. It was whenever I felt like it. It was whenever I remembered. It wasn't until 2014 that I was like, okay, I see other business owners using social media to grow their business. And by 2014, I had already been voted one of the top photographers in the world, most socially influential photographers, one of the most influential photographers in decades. Like, I'm saying this not as humble brags, but to put things in context, that I was more than able to have a successful platform, and I was completely wasting my time on it because I kept on looking at other people saying, look at what you're doing. I don't have the capacity for it, which is total junk if I've ever heard that before. This is truly the ability for people to show up consistently. It wasn't until I had crafted a plan for consistency so that people would know how to expect me to show up as a representation of my business and extend the brand. We went back to understanding that I had created a brand using a blog with nothing more than my words and being consistent. Could I apply the same ideology, short form, on Instagram? And it wasn't until like a big shift happened for me in 2016 where I was just like, I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing other people really use it to grow their business. So this like gestation period between 2014 and 2016 was me just testing, building out processes, understanding what made it work for other people, why wasn't it working for me? And then from 2016 to present day, that's when I feel like the pedal hit the metal because I knew how to show up and connect with people.
That's amazing. And I have to say, I remember when they would hate on the photographers. I always liked it because it was cool to see what people were doing out there. But they really were making fun of a lot of photographers back then for kind of using professional pictures, but that's what they did. So I do think it really goes back to being, again, authentic and making sure you stay authentic in any platform you're on. Instagram can be a little bit intimidating at times. You know, we've talked in the past on the podcast about you're seeing someone's highlight reel. So it can be a little bit much, but I think you've really nailed it. I remember hearing you actually during your keynote, you brought out something that sometimes you sit by people at these conferences and they're just sitting there like, no, I can't do it because I'm a different business. I can't do it because this and that, and kind of bring up all these excuses. And I just remember hearing you kind of say, no, you can all do it, and excuses aren't going to work on you. I mean, you called everyone to the mat right in this huge room with like 7,000 people in there. So how can you help a business owner see if they're starting to make excuses or if there's maybe a bandwidth issue that they need to address their priorities a little bit differently? Because I felt like you called all of us to the mat in that room that day, and I loved it.
You know, I had read something rather recently where somebody had said, whenever you find yourself saying, I don't have time for that, what you should really do is replace it with, that's not a priority. And oftentimes people will use bandwidth as the reason why they're not pursuing things on Instagram. And they'll say that they don't have time, or they don't know how, or they don't have an Instagrammable life. And for every person who can ever come up with a viable excuse, there's somebody who has less and is doing more given the same or worse situation. So you could sit here and waste time and tell me why it's not going to work for you, or you could find all the reasons why it will. And that was the first time that ever in my speaking career, I asked people randomly to throw out ideas in industries and then created content for them on the fly. And the person who I did it, I'm sure, cool. I am so sure, Scott, you're going to love this one. I was like, okay, let's brainstorm. I had never done this before. I was sweating profusely because I was like, girl, you better bring your trash together. Because when you take it out into the wild.
You did not ask for an attorney, did
Scott,
you? Come on.
Why? I'm like, I need a business owner. And then there was like a wave.
It was a wave
funny. Of all these people yelling what their business was. But all I heard through being on stage was, rah. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And then it's quiet. And this one person says, a lawyer. And I was like, oh God, no. And you want to know what? We worked through content for the lawyer as well. Like, I just feel like you give me anything and we'll find a way to make it work. It's just, how bad do you want it? If you can make excuses, you just don't want it bad enough. That's just it. And
it's the mindset, right? It's the mindset that matters. That you go from putting your energy into excuses, as you said, into figuring it out. So I'm curious. I was surprised to hear, and I don't know if how much this ties into. I was surprised to hear you say from 2014 to 16, I was testing, which I think is a great lesson for our listeners, but specifically around processes, and with Instagram. So can you tie together, what does that mean in process? When you talk about processes, you talk about consistency and being there for your fans. What did you learn there that you're willing to, share and disclose, and how can that apply to small businesses?
2014, I'm really looking and asking myself, I decided to get super geeky and ask why people on Instagram were succeeding. And to be fair, I was doing this for all my social platforms. I think thankfully, I've kind of put like an anchor in the ground around Instagram, but I have hundreds of thousands of followers on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, once in the day at Snapchat, on LinkedIn, like that, like it's all about creating the diversity in your marketing. So in 2014, I'm really taking a step back and being like, what is working and why does it work for some people extraordinarily well? I had realized that consistency was the basis, was that the biggest Instagrammers and the strongest people with Facebook pages and the largest followings on LinkedIn was they all had one thing in common. They showed up. They showed up consistently, they showed up ardently, and they showed up with the purpose. It wasn't just like random, I'm only here for promotional periods. It wasn't random, I go really quiet, I post a picture of my cat and his Cheerios, and then all of a sudden I'm a week in Cabo and I spray everybody with 26 photos in 4 days because I'm living my best life, but then all of a sudden I have to go back to my cubicle and then I don't post anything for 3 months. Like, that is not how people win on Instagram or any social platform. So if then the foundational piece was consistency, I needed to build a system on how I could be consistent when I do not have a team. At the time, I did not have a team. At the time, not even now, I don't even have a very interesting life. I am an introvert. I do not have a private jet or yachts. I don't really look all that great in a bikini. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's no reason for me to be like that quintessential fashion blogger, Instagrammer lifestyle. So what then do I do? Like, us, the plebeians, how do we show up? So I decided to create a month of content in a day. Like, I sat down and I spent a whole day dedicated to creating out marketing content that would last me a month instead of randomly on March 16th scrolling through my phone, desperate to post something, and feeling the same way on November 6th, scrolling through my phone, being like, why is it always perpetually like I'm thirsty and behind the curve? It was realized was when I had a plan, like 90% of the battle was done. That's not even creating the content in one day. It's having the plan for the one day. And I think that was a game changer massively for my business.
Yeah, when you said earlier, I heard just sort of bits and pieces of this in your intro when you talked about, it's how much people are willing to show up consistently. And I just want to call out that I think you said, you kind of, when you shared your sort of the time when it wasn't working for you is when you were copying other people. And I think the distinction that I thought was impressive is you said, I want to evaluate why people are being successful so that you can actually get underneath and understand the why versus just parroting what everybody else out there is doing. So I love that.
Well,
I love that
also,
mindset.
To be fair, is I understand that the minute you look at what somebody else is doing and try to make it your own, you will always, best case scenario, be second. Like, when you have when you grapple with the why, then you figure out a way and how to do it your own way. And I have to say, I was the first person to learn how to do this wrong. Made so many mistakes. So many reasons I had to apologize, so many like jackups that I realized if I just understand the why, I then make it my own and I can walk in who 100% I am. And people smell that on the internet.
So how do you prioritize your time to make sure that you can have both the consistency and also the responsiveness, which I think are kind of two sides to the same coin.
It's working in everything into a schedule. And even when I was just starting out in my career and I didn't have very much money, I knew that outsourcing was a big piece to scaling. And I didn't hire my very first team member in, I think, 12 years into my business. So I was doing everything for a while. And the reason I was able to grow so quickly was because I outsourced components of my business that I wasn't the strongest at. Now that I've been able to hire people on our team, it still keeps me in my zone of genius. And that doesn't mean that I'm not wildly running at 100 miles an hour for everything that I do. It's this, I live and die by a schedule. And I know that that is not for everybody. Specifically ironic that I'm a creative. But the thing that I discovered early on was that when I didn't have a schedule, I never had time to create. So part of the schedule is giving yourself the time and latitude for sections of creation and sections for responding to DMs, sections for content creation, sections for responding to email, sections for podcast interviews. It's like you will know what I'm doing every day because I have a minute by minute schedule.
That is such a good tip.
So
it is so easy.
So today and tomorrow when you're going to be responding.
100.
When you're going to
100.
Because it is so easy to lose track of time when you're on doing anything, especially if you're trying to do it all. Mm-hmm. And I think that is like a major blockbuster tip there is schedule it in. And also, especially for being creative or innovative.
100%. And then one thing that I want to draw a major pointed distinction is that there is a fine line between consumption and creation. Like oftentimes you'll be like, I just don't have time to respond. Well, it's because you went down the Instagram rabbit hole of hashtags and you're barely coming up for air. And then you realize you have 20 DMs. You're like, I don't possibly have time for them. I'm like, if you go in with your only objective, which is to create, like I don't surf Instagram in the middle of the day. That's Jasmine Star time to work. The Jasmine time when I just want to like waste time, that's after hours, and I can never. That's just me like surfing. So very strategic.
And that's not scheduled. I mean, maybe in big blocks, but not
Oh,
to
you
the
mean
minute,
like just
right?
with like I'm like passing time? Oh no, that's
consumption
not.
part.
No, I would actually be embarrassed. Like, you know, some people watch TV. I don't. Like, I just go down like rabbit holes on like stories and IGTV.
It's so
like,
easy to do on Instagram.
It is.
So easy. Oh my gosh. Well,
That's good.
I
Well,
don't
so
want to.
speaking of time, I'm concerned that we only
know.
have maybe 3 or 4 minutes left. So I want to make sure we're putting the time in we're wrapping up in the best way. So Crystal, any final thoughts? And Jasmine, anything that you really want to get, message to our audience of small business owners that we haven't talked about? Crystal, why don't you start?
I really just want to make sure everyone knows where to find Jasmine, because I know she keeps me on track with my social media. I'm looking at what she's doing and keeping track of making sure we're authentic as a brand as well. So really, for me, my final thought is, Jasmine, let's make sure they know where to find you.
Oh, thank you so much. All social platforms at Jasmine Star. You can also find me at jasminestar.com and at my social media membership for people who want to create a brand and market in social media. You can find that at socialcurator.com. And I think that any parting thoughts would be for people to understand that the only person stopping them from success is themselves, and to really deeply and profoundly understand that people's opinions of you, your partners, your parents, your children, the person who spoke negatively to you in 11th grade homeroom and said you'd never amount to much. And that's the thing you remember when you're trying to go live on Instagram and nobody is showing up. When all you hear are crickets in the background and you don't understand why anybody is voting on a poll. It's you are enough. And it's the people who quit right where you are that never get to where you want to go. So you are enough. It's just, do you have the willingness to keep on pushing forward to get to where you want to go? And I believe that we all have that wild ability for success as long as you remain undaunted.
I love that.
Wow.
What a good way to end this show. I mean, I feel like I can go and tackle the whole world.
You should.
So thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you guys so much.
You are so awesome.
Jasmine, thank you for being a walking example of the principle of entrepreneurial independence. Clayton and I wrote about that in our book, and your challenge to our listeners is exactly what it's all about. As entrepreneurs, you've got to be in the place in your mind where you're undaunted, and I'll leave your words to ring in their ears. So thank you so much, Jasmine. Thank you, Crystal. Thanks everybody else in the studio. It's been a great session. We're going to call this a wrap for Small Biz Buzz.
Thanks for listening to Small Biz Buzz. Please take a second to subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star rating. It helps keep the show going. And if you need a hand with growing your small business, head over to Keap.com. That's Keap.com and get started. More business, less work. That's Keap.